Pepsi Watson, Crime and Justice TV, broadcasting today on July the 9th, 2019, from Crime and Justice TV headquarters in Brixton, South London, United Kingdom. Good afternoon, everybody. This video is a video responding to the attempt on Monday the 8th of July 2019 by Quintuple child sex torture killer Myra Hindley supporter and former prison officer Joe Chapman to have me detained indefinitely in custody here in the capital in London. This global media broadcast response will deal with and address the vicious attempt by Joe Chapman to have me detained in custody indefinitely. This video is a follow-on from the cyber attack response to child sex torture killer Myra Hindley supporter Joe Chapman. I'll put the link to that video in the video description below. Joe Chapman is a former civil servant, a former prison officer with 24 years experience, and a former prison consultant whom helped secure the release of hundreds of convicted child sex abusers. Joe Chapman also publicly supported the release into the community of convicted child sex torture killer Myra Hindley. Myra Hindley, along with Ian Brady, raped, tortured, slashed the throats and chopped the bodies up of 5 young children before burying the bodies on the moor. On the 6th of July 2019, I engaged Joe Chapman in critical discussion. Joe became abusive and immediately attacked my character. Joe then initiated a Facebook post targeting me and my character, inciting hatred against me and inciting and orchestrating a plan to have me recalled to custody indefinitely because I am on a life license for the IPP sentence which I received in 2006. At 9 a.m. on Monday the 8th of July, Joe Chapman contacted the National Probation Service and attempted to have me detained indefinitely. Joe Chapman attempted to destroy my life and inflict suffering upon my mother, my cousin, my family, and the people that love and care about me, including the many children that I have in my life, who would, I might add, have been utterly distraught and heartbroken if Joe Chapman had succeeded in his vicious plan to have me recalled to custody indefinitely. Joe Chapman has also attempted to undermine the tireless work of professional prison staff at HMP Winchester, my current probation officer here in London, and countless other multidisciplinary professionals whom have helped and supported me for the past 14 years. I will address the recall to custody attempt by child sex torture killer Myra Hindley supporter Joe Chapman. On Monday, the 8th of July, after Joe Chapman attempted to have me recalled to custody indefinitely, he posted yet another post on Facebook which stated the following. Pepsi Watson, I have spoken to the National Probation Service this morning who are fully aware of his behaviour. They appear happy to allow him to pursue his mission, and I am advised to make a complaint to the police if things escalate, which I will do if necessary. I am aware that he has made what he calls a cyber attack against me via his YouTube channel. I am not concerned at all by that, but I am concerned that vulnerable people from IPP families are also troubled by him. For somebody who claims to fight for the rights of serving prisoners and their families, it is worrying that he chooses to add to their distress. I have blocked him from my account, which satisfies me, and I don't intend to waste any more time on this man. So we can see there the proof that child sex torture killer Myra Hindley supporter and former prison officer Joe Chapman attempted to manipulate the probation service into recalling me to custody indefinitely. Claiming that I made a cyber attack against him is a lie and an untruth and false testimony. The video which is on my channel, is a cyber attack response. A cyber attack response against the cyber attack on me and my family by Joe Chapman. This is yet another attempt to slander me and manipulate the brains of his followers on Facebook to incite further hatred toward me. No vulnerable people from IPP families are troubled by me. This is yet another lie. The vulnerable families Joe Chap mentions here are in fact white middle-class family members of serving IPP prisoners. These families are embarrassed and ashamed of their loved one being imprisoned subject to the banned and barbaric IPP prison sentence. This is evidence twofold. One, by the clear and obvious blank profile nature of their Facebook accounts, as is the case with Anne Horton, and two, the Facebook accounts of the white middle-class Joe Chapman supporters, which are not blank, do not ever share any content about their loved one whom is imprisoned. The reason for this is again twofold. One, these people are determined to maintain their white middle-class public image and do not wish for this image to be stained in any way or compromised at any cost. And two, this is also the fault of the post-Sarah Payne, post-Jamie Bulger politicisation of law and order, dangerousness, renaissance, hysterical media, stridence and sophism era, coupled with the fact that the consequence of this media hysteria, in which mainstream media systematically target high-profile criminal cases for A, profit, and B, to push current political ideology and agenda, along with also pushing the narrative of the embedded, entrenched, decades-old-long culture of child abuse in youth custody, institutional racism, and a culture that persuades with frightening effect all of modern society that all men, women, and children whom enter custody are subhuman and are not worthy of human rights, rehabilitation, or a second chance. So, it is understandable to an extent why these middle-class white families will not dare share their loved one's plight of injustice over their Facebook pages. At the same time, that's your family. That's why I respect my cousin and my auntie Karen, because they share my content and are in no way ashamed of me. Quite the contrary, they are proud of me and proud of my progress with criminal criminal desistance, and also proud of my progress with healing and proud of the progress with my character. Joe Chapman, I told you in no uncertain terms in the last video to leave me and my family and the children in my life alone. Yet you ignore this and proceed with your vicious attempt to have me detained in custody. Then, when the National Probation Service inform you that I'm at all times open and transparent with my exceptional probation officer here in London, you then choose to post another slanderous Facebook post in which you encourage and incite further hatred toward me by inviting your white middle-class Facebook followers to message you privately about me to continue to conspire against me privately as opposed to publicly. Joe Chapman, again I tell you, but clearer and louder this time, yeah? Leave me and my family and the children in my life alone, please. I've done nothing wrong to you. I've committed no crime. I've never once abused or threatened you. I have in no way, shape or form at any point during our limited discussion of 2 or 3 messages undermined any of my license conditions. The only thing that I have done to you is engage you in critical argument, which you are unable to accept. So then instead of responding to the critical argument with counter-argument, you attacked my character, telling me to die of lung cancer and verbally abusing me, calling me names, which I won't repeat on here. Did you inform the National Probation Service of that, Joe? No, you didn't. When you spoke to the National Probation Service to attempt to get me recalled to custody indefinitely, you did so via false testimony. And false testimony, A, is a reflection of your character, not mine, and B, false testimony harms people and is a dishonest practice to engage in. What does it say, Joe, about the character and integrity of you as a man that you would offer false testimony and be selective and dishonest in your dialogue content, in your communications with the National Probation Service, in your vicious attempt to have me recalled, as opposed to my character integrity, that I am at all times in supervision with my probation officer, entirely open and honest and transparent? I would say that that says a lot. I am subject to an IPP life licence with the London Probation Service. I have a great and strong relationship with not only my probation officer, but also with the duty probation officer whom I see on occasion. I am, at all times, open and transparent, and as such, I'm therefore able to realise and enjoy the wisdom, support, insight and correct instruction and wise counsel from these exceptional and professional, hard-working probation officers here in London, in the capital of England. I respect and at all times adhere to my licence conditions. There are no concerns whatsoever about my conduct and behaviour from any of the wide range of multidisciplinary community-placed, vastly experienced professionals that continue to work with and monitor me in the community on a weekly basis. Quite the contrary. These professionals who work closely with me are very proud of my ongoing achievements and often share with me their admiration at the extensive progress I've made in a relatively short period of time since leaving the probation hostel in January 2019. I am clean and abstinent from drugs and alcohol. I enjoy great relationships with all professionals working with me. I enjoy good relationships with others. I am finishing my degree in criminology and psychology with the Open University. I travel up and down the country, visiting high secure hospitals and prisons, visiting prisoners with deafness and speech impediments. I feed the homeless once a month. I run a blog on penal reform. I run a YouTube channel and am inundated with supportive messages and inspiration from all over the world. From Canada to the Bronx, from Thailand to Sweden, from southern France to Queens, New York City. In fact, I will read a message to you from a young man in Indiana I received recently. Lee McFarland, Indiana, United States of America. You're an amazing person, my friend. I hope you don't mind that I call you a friend. You have endured so much, and yet in a short 20 minutes of video, you have inspired me and touched my heart. In fact, touched my very soul. I offer you my friendship, my support, and my encouragement. Lee. I enjoy visits to my mother in Norwich. I spend time with the children of my life who have missed out in so much time with me. I embrace all the feedback on my YouTube channel and meet people all over London. Drug addicts, PTSD sufferers, sex abuse survivors, mental health sufferers. I travel to them, hug them, embrace them, share food with them, and sit in park benches in London for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 hours sometimes. Then, when they leave, I go back to the bench and I sit on the bench for 2 hours more in a constant state of bliss. A constant state of bliss. I am working tirelessly on my business plan. I'm doing extensive market research. I'm pitching later in the year for a large sum of money for my business with a community contact in North London. I'm currently working on a trio of 20-minute documentaries in the London area and will be pitching at a later date for financial backing with big media contacts to direct a documentary on penal reform matters that are of interest to me. I'm currently in touch in communications with penal reformers in the United States of America, and I'm planning to meet with them in Mexico at Cancun in 2020. I'm also travelling to Northern Ireland in the new year in March to begin networking and working on projects in Northern Ireland related to penal reform. I do all of the above, living on an income of £195 a month, living in charity accommodation. A man is only as resourceful and productive as his tools enable him to be. My life is prosperous, exciting, fulfilling, and it's not only my life which has been transformed, but also the lives of the people whom love and care about me. And you, Joe Chapman, have no right to play God with my life and attempt to have this all taken away from me to satisfy your personal vendetta against me at the cost, pain, and suffering of all the people who I love and care about. From the moment I awaken, I immerse myself in the service of others. I do this for 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, with no days off. What good are you putting into the world, Joe Chapman? You sit in your armchair all day, hiding behind your iPad, conspiring against me and others, and sit there all day inciting hatred against people who are doing everything they can to change their lives. I'm not perfect. I'm a work in progress. I'm far from perfect. I make mistakes all the time, and I fall short of my high standards of moral ideals most days. Progress, not perfection. But I do not deserve to go to prison potentially for the rest of my life, subject to a banned and Strasbourg condemned barbaric IPP sentence because I engaged you in critical argument and you didn't like it. In one of Joe Chapman's recent Facebook posts uploaded on the 7th of June 2019 on his Facebook page, Chapman uploads an article with a photo of a Muslim man praying on a prayer mat. This article states, Muslim gangs beat prisoners who do not convert to Islam. In the Facebook post, child sex torture killer Myra Hindley supporter Joe Chapman states, still going on 6 years later. Well, who would have thought that? This reprehensible act of racial hatred incitement was actually challenged in the comment thread of this Joe Chapman Facebook post. I'm actually feeling offended, as I read that, offended on behalf of my good Muslim brother friends over in East London. I wasn't expecting that. Emma Stanley stated, Joe, this kind of reporting fuels even more Islamophobic thinking. Not all Muslims go around doing this. In fact, I would assume it's the extremist Muslims who are, your average Joe Muslim wouldn't make or force you to revert. I understand it happens, but I hate the way that all Muslims are cast in the same light in the media. This Facebook post, in my opinion, speaks volumes about the character, mindset and belief systems of child sex torture killer Myra Hindley supporter Joe Chapman. Joe Chapman self-proclaims as an expert on criminal justice. Joe Chapman is not an expert on criminal justice. Joe Chapman is an expert on youth custody child abuse, the infliction of it. Joe Chapman is an expert on working in institutions diseased to the core with infliction of child abuse and institutional racism and gladiator schools, where prison officers place bets on child suicide and where ethnic minority children are placed in cells with known racists for sick kicks and are then murdered for the pleasure of prison officers, as was the case with Zahid Mubarak. Joe Chapman is an expert in racist child murder. Joe Chapman is an expert in supporting quintuple child sex torture killer Myra Hindley for release into the community. Joe Chapman is an expert in failure. Joe Chapman represents everything wrong with the modern penal and criminal justice system. The child abuse, the racism, the near 90% recidivism for young offenders, and a suicide and mental health and drug epidemic of proportions never witnessed or seen before. Modern thinkers, modern thinking penal reformers, next generation academics, social workers, mental health workers, prison officers, police officers and teachers will serve their future careers very well indeed via ignoring the dinosaur thinking and state-sponsored propaganda that pollutes the cyber world via the Facebook page and website page of Joe Chapman. Yet that choice, my brothers and sisters, is your choice. I'm going to finalise now, then conclude. Joe Chapman is a former prison officer who supported Myra Hindley for release into society. Joe Chapman also took his 8-year-old daughter into the prison where Myra Hindley was housed to cook and paint. Myra Hindley was responsible for child rape, prolonged torture and throat slitting mid-child rape of 5 children. Myra Hindley then helped Brady to cut up the bodies of the dead children and buried them on the moors. Joe Chapman helped support and secure the release of scores and scores, if not hundreds, of child sex abusers into the community, some of which went on to reoffend and harm more children. Joe Chapman publicly states that drug dealers are at least, if not worse, than child sex predators whom sexually abuse children. Joe Chapman publicly states that house burglars and commercial burglars are borderline rapists. Joe Chapman publicly condemns paedophile hunters whom have been successful in achieving the convictions of hundreds of child sex abusers and who have received public support from some, not all, but some senior police officers all over the nation. On careful scrutiny of Joe Chapman's Facebook page, Joe Chapman displays and exhibits what appears to be an effective and somewhat disturbing level of control over the minds and brains of predominantly middle-aged women and also some young women who are mostly lonely due to their partners being imprisoned. It appears that Joe is extremely effective in targeting these women's vulnerabilities and does so while practicing many of the interpersonal, professional listening and advanced empathy skills which Joe Chapman has learned and practiced due to his former counselling training and practice as a prison counsellor. Considering Joe Chapman's extensive prison and criminal justice experience working closely with prisoners for near 40 years, these lonely middle-aged women seem fairly easy prey for him. It is therefore my careful and considered critical analysis conclusion that former prison officer and child sex torture killer Myra Hindley supporter Joe Chapman is displaying traits of what appears to be a modern-day online egomaniac cult leader with entrenched power and control personality traits, specifically practiced and realised against a certain type of woman, i.e. middle-aged, currently separated from partner, and whom exerts power and control over the minds of these women by preying on their vulnerabilities and weaknesses and natural human need for emotional security in the absence of their imprisoned partners. Personality and behavioural traits synonymous with cult leaders of times gone by. For example, the power struggle between Waco cult leader David Koresh and George Roden bears striking resemblance to the online behaviour of Joe Chapman. David Koresh was shot and killed at the siege of Mount Carmel on April the 19th, 1993, after a 51-day standoff in which 79 Branch Davidians perished, including 21 children. When Koresh announced that God had instructed him to marry Rachel Jones, who then added Koresh to her name, there was a short period of calm at Mount Carmel, but it proved only temporary. In the ensuing power struggle, George Roden, claiming to have the support of the majority of the group, forced Koresh off the property with his group at gunpoint. The moment that I engaged Joe Chapman in critical analysis, he viciously attacked my character and then attempted to have me recalled to custody indefinitely. Not in my critical analysis because he could not respond to the critical argument with counter-argument because he perceived me as a threat to his power. He was therefore unable to see my pure heart and pure motive, and so therefore forced me off his property at gunpoint. Joe Chapman is retired, and I would politely and courteously suggest that Joe Chapman enjoys his well-earned retirement and suggests he pursues activities which bring him joy and fulfillment, while at the same time leaving criminal justice, modern thinking reform to the experts. Joe Chapman incites racial hatred over Facebook toward the Muslim community. I have observed the damage this causes to modern society and the division and hatred this has caused over the past few months in both the political arena in modern Britain and on the ground. I've spoken extensively about extremism in the modern British penal system, and I'll put the links to those videos in the video description below. Extremism in the modern British penal system is a problem. Extremism by fundamentalists from differing backgrounds, not just Islamic backgrounds and cultures, and is simply unacceptable and despicable It is simply unacceptable and despicable to promote hatred towards the entire of the 2.6 million Muslims in English communities due to the distorted beliefs and attitudes of a select few, a handful, in high secure prisons in the high security dispersal prison sector. Crime and Justice TV, the study of criminal justice in a postmodern world, a modern thinker's perspective. Supports men, women and children and victims of crime from all faiths, backgrounds and cultures. Supports all faiths, backgrounds and cultures. I have great relationships with my Muslim friends and brothers and their mothers and families, such as my brother Karamba over in East London. I'm committed to developing these relationships further and with working closely with not only the Muslim community up the road in Brixton, but with all community faith leaders of all faiths and cultures and backgrounds. 26 years after the racist and disgusting murder of Stephen Lawrence, and on this day, Tuesday, the 9th of July 2019, when only 2 hours ago Lord Triesman has just resigned, the Labour whip, citing institutional anti-Semitism as the reason, and publicly stating at 3 p.m. today, we may one day be the party of anti-racism, but it certainly isn't today. No man, woman or child in modern 21st century Britain should ever be discriminated against because of the colour of their skin or their faith beliefs. Anybody who peddles this nonsense on my YouTube channel in the comments will be banned. Joe Chapman has had an extensive career in the prison service and the criminal justice sector. This, to an extent, is admirable and credit is due in that regard. One cannot take away from Joe Chapman his tireless work ethic over the decades. I wish Joe Chapman no harm. I wish Joe Chapman only blessings, long health and prosperity and happiness, not only in his own life, but in the lives of all the people close to him whom he loves and cares about. My offer to Joe Chapman in the previous video still stands. I'm happy and more than willing to share food and water with you across from my table. We can do it on this table right here. Anytime that suits you. You are welcome in my home anytime. I will embrace you, I will hug you, and I will love you. I will love you by recognizing myself in you. I forgive you. Since I forgave you before, you've attempted to harm me further by having me taken away from my home and my family, the people whom love and care about me, and also to have me taken away from the children in my life. Again, I forgive you. I wish you only long health, and the more and more and more that you harm and attempt to inflict more harm and suffering upon myself and the people I love, then the more and more and more I will continue to forgive you and continue to love you. Even if you were successful in your plan to have me detained indefinitely and I was locked up indefinitely in the cesspit of humanity that is HMP Brixton, locked up 23.5 hours a day, surrounded by a mental health and drug epidemic of proportions never seen before, stabbings, slashings and suicides with a record all-time high in modern British penal criminal justice system history of assaults against staff, with my family's and children's lives heartbroken and distraught, I would rest on my knees on the hard prison floor every night at midnight, and I would pray only for long health and prosperity for you, Joe Chapman, your wife, and also your children. I will do so 1,000 times and for 5 years in prison if need be, for in direct proportion to the level of forgiveness I afford you, I shall be rewarded by the fruits of my labour, within my heart, within my mind, within my spirit, and within my soul. I'm Pepsi Watson for Crime and Justice TV. On Tuesday, the 9th of July, 2019, I wish you all good health. I wish you all prosperity. I wish you all an abundance of blessings. And above all, and most importantly, may you continue to love by recognizing yourself in others.